Hi, I'm Chris, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make a simple cabinet door like this in a shaker style. So throughout this episode I'm going to show you a few different techniques along the way, show you the technique that I'm using. I'm also going to show you how to use the router table properly and how to drop pieces in to avoid the groove coming out of the end. I'm going to show you the best cutter that I use for the router table for tongue and grooves or mortise and tenons. So I've already planed and fitnessed all the pieces that I need for this project when I built the frames for these units that I'm making, so that will save you a bit of boredom during this episode. This is going to be a bit of a longer one, so grab yourself a coffee and let's get to it. Right, so to measure up for the door, I'm taking the frame here. I'm measuring the width of it, so we've got 228. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a 1.5 millimeter gap, around each edge. So what did I have there? I had 228, so I'm going to have 225 as my width. And I've got 665. And 665, so that's going to make that 662 for the height of the door. So it's 1.5 millimeters off at the top and the bottom, and 1.5 millimeters off at each side. So this is what I've done here. I've just basically done a quick sketch of the doors, and then the jaw fronts, we can ignore that one for now. And then here, what I've done is I've done all the sizes that I need, and I'll show you how I get those sizes, and I've even marked them as rails, which we need to know for later on. So on doors you have rails and stiles. Stiles go up and down vertical, and rails are horizontal. And an easy way to remember that is rails are like a handrail that you would hold on to, and they're always horizontal. So to get the length of the rails, the easiest way to do that, well, the only way to do that really, is you take your overall width of the door and then you minus off the width of these two. So I know the width on these are 59 millimeters each one, so that's 118 millimeters. So I take 446, which is the width, and I minus off 118 millimeters, which leaves me with 328. So over on this side, I've got my 328 for the rails, and I've got my 664 for the stiles up there. So I need 4 stiles at 664, and I need 4 rails at 328. I've got more there because on my other page there, I've already worked this out for my other ones. So whenever you need to work this out, I always put rails next to any of my rails. The reason for this is if you're using mortise and tenon doors, then you need to know where your rails are, because you need to add on for the tenons whatever that length will be, maybe 40 millimeter tenons or 10 millimeter tenons if you're doing it on a router table. These particular doors, we're going to use the Festool domino machine, so I don't need to worry about that because it's a mortise in each slot and the tenon is separate. So my next job is to head over to the miter saw and cut some of these to length. I'm only going to be cutting the stiles to length at the moment, and I'm going to leave the rails long. Now the reason for that is they're going to go through the router table, and some of my rails are 107 millimeters long, and I don't want to be putting 107 millimeters through the router table like that. That is just far too dangerous. So what I do is I leave them at a longer length, and then I can cut those down afterwards. I can't do that with the stiles, and the reason why is because I'm going to be dropping the stiles in at either end, and I'll show you basically what that is as I do it, because I don't want the grooves coming out at each end, because this is not having tenons, this is having Festool dominoes. So you don't want the ends of the grooves showing on these, but I'll show you that when we get to that point anyway. So before marking anything to length, the next thing to do is to make sure you've got a very sharp pencil. Now fortunately this pencil here has got a sharpener on the end. I'll put a link to this in the description because it really is a great pencil and it saves you losing them, and you actually get a pack of 2 of these as well. So looking at my measurements here, I've labelled the ones that are rails and then I've left the ones that are stiles and put them to one side. So the rails, as you can see, are quite short lengths. We've got 124 millimeters, 107 millimeters and so on. And I don't want to put those through the router table at that size. That would just be too dangerous. So as the grooves go all the way through on those, I'm going to do those in long lengths and then cut them down afterwards. And then after that, then I can think about doing my stiles. So here we are at my router table, which is a Triton WX7 work center. Do I recommend this? No. Well, actually, it's okay. I bought this on Facebook Marketplace. It was going very cheap because I was looking for this particular router, which I'll show you in a second. I thought I'll check on Marketplace and see if there's one second hand for sale. And I managed to get the router and all of this and this other insert for the table when it's not used as a router table. And I got all that cheaper than what the router would have been on its own. So I thought I'd buy this, but as a portable workbench, it weighs a ton, you know, and I mean, if you've seen my videos before, you know the kind of stuff that I lift, you know, some of the heavy tools that I lift, the DeWalt miter saw, for example. So when I say this is a bit heavy for portable use, I mean it. It is pretty heavy. But we've got myself a router table here. I am going to build one in my big workbench anyway. So this is just temporary, just to get this job done. So the router model in this is the one I wanted, which I'll put on the screen now. So the reason why I chose this router to leave in a router table is for this thing here. And this basically means you push this through and it links onto a piece on the router, and then when you turn it, the bit goes up and down. So you don't have to keep messing around underneath the table. You can just use that, and this is brilliant for adjusting the bit. So the router bits that I'm using for this, or I'm only using one of the bits, is this Freud bit. It comes in a pack like this. I'll put a link in the description. So basically that's one cutter there, and what happens is you unscrew it. Obviously I'd never have it set like this, but this is just to store it. And then what happens is, this is if you wanted to make tenons. So you put all your shims in here to determine your tenon height, and then obviously that would be the bit that doesn't get cut, and these 2 bits here will get cut, so you end up with a T shape. So that's your tongue bit basically. It's a tongue and groove kit, but you obviously mortise and tenons, well, grooves and tenons it works for. So that's one bit that you get. I'll put a link to all of this in the description anyway, because I really do recommend this. I can't remember the price, but it's very, very good quality. And I'll show you another reason why these bits are important rather than using just a normal router bit. So there's what it does there. Hopefully you can see that. That's just a chart of it all. But yeah, basically you can do quite big tenons or quite big grooves and tongues there. Right, so what I'm going to do is set the height of this. So I've got my piece of scrap there. So I'm going to push this through and I'm going to work out where it goes on here and then just adjust it from there really. Right, so for this test piece, I just mark the face on there, and that means that's always going to be face down across there so I don't get muddled up. Right, so ear defenders in, eye protection on, and off we go. So I'd just like to say that I hope you are enjoying this video so far. I appreciate it is a bit more long-winded than usual, just because I want to try and include as much information as I can. If you are enjoying this format, or you enjoy my videos in general, please consider subscribing. I'm not monetized yet. This is where I'm at the moment, roughly, at the time of making this video. And when I am monetized, any small money that I make from it, from the adverts, which they're putting in anyway, I can put towards a new camera and new lighting for the workshop, just to try and improve the video quality to improve your experience. So that's what I've got there for my groove. So I'm gonna have to take it a bit further so I can measure it, because obviously the cutter's rounded. But height wise, or distance between the top and the bottom, yeah, it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't need to have this at any particular measurement. I just want to get it roughly central, because as I said, when I've marked the face, the faces, because they're always going to be machined downwards, these are always going to line up when you've got the faces all facing the same way. So that doesn't need to be like exact between like that distance there and that distance there. It doesn't need to be exact. So I'm going to push it through a bit further, and then I can work out how deep it is, and then obviously I've got to adjust the depth for the panels. So my depth of the groove is 10 mil, which I think is actually where the bearing is on the cutter. However, you can obviously move the fence forward and backwards, well, forward anyway, to shorten that depth. So what I need to do now is check that that groove fits on my plywood that I'm putting in here. Right, so the plywood's actually too loose in there, so what I've got to do is make this groove narrower. So to do that, I'm going to have to take a shim out of this cutter, and then I can show you the cutter a bit better actually as well. So I just unplug the router. Unfortunately, I do need to move the fence out of the way, which I didn't want to do. So with these cutters, you take the nut off the top. Some spare washers there. And the groove bit actually comes in two pieces. Like so. Right, so we've got our piece on. There's our shims there. what I'm doing here is I'm just using this piece just to line up the fence again. So I've got the same depth groove, but we're going to run it through the other side and see how that comes out. Alright, so this is our new groove here. So I'm just going to go and check this on the sheet of plywood. Right, so hopefully you can see here, that's my sheet of 9mm ply. It fits on really nice. It might even make a popping sound as I take it off. No, but yeah, it fits on there nicely. Right, so I've got all my rails now, my face marked on them. Go down across like that. The stiles I'm not doing yet. The rails are going to get their dominoes in the ends once I've cut them all to length anyway. But the stiles, they obviously get them here, so then it would join like so. So rather than me grooving those now, I'm going to do those after I've put the domino holes in, just to make it a bit easier. And I've got to do a different technique on here with those because I don't want the groove coming to the end. And that's where this particular outer bit comes in, so stick around for that. So I'll just quickly show you the safest way that I know of putting these through, because I know a lot of you watching haven't worked in joinery shops, so you're not trained in the sort of the health and safety side of things. And when it comes to machines like this, that's very important. So this router table with that type of bit, the groove bit like that, where you put the shims in it, is mimicking a large spindle moulder. Obviously this is just a router table that anyone can own, so it's probably best I show you the best way of putting this through. So what I tend to do is, as I'm pushing it through, I've never got my hand here where the blade is or the cutter. So I'm pushing it through. I've got these fingerboards on here to help create downwards pressure. So I'm pushing it there against the fence. As I'm pushing it along with my hand, you can't see it because it's not on camera, this right hand here is over here pushing that along. So I'm pushing in there, these are pushing down for me, and then I'm pushing along with my hand. Now on the spindle moulder, you'd probably have a power feeder doing this for you, where you can just stand out the way and the rollers will push it through. But with this, obviously I'm doing it by hand. So pushing there, and then when I've got a nice bit of material this side of the cutter, then what I'll do is I can then move my hand over here. Don't cross your arms like that. Step round. So now I've got complete control and the cutter's in the middle away from my hands. And then I can push against this fence here and keep pushing. And then when I get to sort of about here, then the camera tripod's in the way, but what I can do is step around a bit further than this, and now I'm well out of the way. Cutter's here and I'm over here. If I slip at all, I'm going to slip that way, so you're out the way there. And you always want to, like using a router, you always, or a spindle moulder, you always want to come in on this. It's got an arrow on here anyway, but you always want to come in from the right to the left if you're doing it this way. So opposite to the way that the cutter's spinning. There are times where you can feed it in that way. You'd obviously remove these, but you have to be very careful. If you're doing something like grooving on laminate boards, for example, putting a groove in the back of a cabinet or something like that, it just creates a cleaner cut because you're working with the, you're not working against the cutter. But that's something that isn't really recommended, because if you come in this way and it catches, it will throw your piece miles out. Whereas this way, it's always sort of pushing back against you, so it's a lot safer. And the cutters are also shaped that way to cut this way anyway. Right, we're going to have to actually stop the video there just because it is getting a bit long. My computer can't handle the rendering of the longer videos, and I'm sure you are getting a bit bored now. So if you do want to see the next part, which will be coming as soon as I edit it, then please hit that subscribe button and join me next time. Thank you.